After being paralyzed in a car accident that claimed the life of my best friend, my parents are forcing me to leave before my sister visits. Discovering hidden photos in our attic has shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. I'm 19, and I really need some outside perspective because the past few months have been nothing short of a nightmare. 5 months ago, my world flipped upside down in one terrible moment. My best friend, Megan, 19, and I were driving back after spending the day touring the university we had both dreamed of attending. We just received our acceptance letters and were ecstatic. This was the plan we'd had since we were 14. Go to the same school, live in the same dorm, and do everything together. Megan and I had been inseparable since middle school. We first became friends in 7th grade when a group of girls were picking on me during lunch. Megan didn't hesitate. She told them off and sat with me instead. From that day forward, we were practically glued at the hip. Weekends were spent at my house, so often that my parents used to joke that they had an honorary second daughter. Her family even gave me a key to their house. Every school project, every club, every college application. We tackled them all together. That night should have been a celebration. We'd spent the day exploring campus, deciding on dorms, and even stumbled upon this cute little coffee shop where we planned to spend countless hours studying. Megan was in the middle of laughing about something dumb her younger brother had done. I can't even remember what it was now. We had our road trip playlist on, laughing and singing along, when everything went wrong. Bright headlights came out of nowhere. A drunk driver swerved into our lane, and I tried to react, but it all happened too quickly. The car spun wildly, and all I could do was scream Megan's name over and over. Moments earlier, we'd been laughing, but now everything was chaos. I kept reaching for her, desperate to grab her arm, anything. The sound of metal grinding and glass shattering was deafening. Megan wasn't saying anything, and there was so much blood. I think I passed out because the next thing I remember was being trapped, hanging upside down in my seatbelt, unable to feel my legs. People outside the car were shouting, and flashing red and blue lights lit up the darkness. Someone was talking about getting us out. I kept calling for Megan, but she didn't answer. Her hand was just inches away from mine, and when I finally managed to touch it, it was cold. Then, nothing. The next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital 3 days later. My parents were sitting by my bed, and I could tell from their faces that everything was wrong. Megan didn't survive. She died instantly at the scene. My best friend, the girl I'd planned to share a dorm with, my future maid of honor, was just gone. Megan's parents came to visit me in the hospital. Her mom couldn't even look at me without breaking down, though she said she didn't blame me for the crash. They told me the drunk driver who hit us had been arrested. Megan was their only daughter. They'd already put down the deposit for her college. Her little brother, who's just 10, keeps texting me, asking when Megan's coming back. They don't know how to tell him she isn't. As if losing Megan wasn't enough, the doctors told me I was paralyzed from the waist down. They weren't sure if I'd ever walk again. It felt like my entire life, everything I'd planned and dreamed about, vanished in a single night. Seeing Megan's parents at the hospital made me think about how much had changed so quickly. Just a few months ago, everything felt so normal. My parents were amazing before all of this. When Megan and I first started talking about going to college together, they went all out to support us. Dad created these super detailed spreadsheets to compare schools, while Mom was already brainstorming dorm room essentials. They treated Megan like family, letting her stay with us almost every weekend during junior year when her parents were constantly fighting. She was like a second daughter to them. Maybe that's part of why this all hurts so much now. During the first month after the accident, I was barely conscious most of the time. Between surgeries and the heavy doses of pain medication, everything was a blur. My parents took care of everything. They dealt with the doctors, handled the insurance mess, and even converted our downstairs guest room into a bedroom for me since I couldn't manage the stairs anymore. Mom cut back on her work hours to be home with me, while Dad managed the endless stream of paperwork and medical bills. They were there for every appointment, helped me figure out how to dress myself, and even guided me through things I never thought I'd need help with, like learning how to use the bathroom all over again. It was unbearable, but they were so determined to get me through it. Recovery has been nothing short of hell. Physical therapy feels like trying to relearn every basic function from scratch, and it's excruciating. Weekly doctor's appointments have become routine, and my medications are constantly being adjusted, each change coming with awful side effects. Then there's figuring out how to do the most basic things while in a wheelchair. My parents don't complain, but I can see how much it's breaking them. Medical bills are crushing us. At night, I sometimes hear them arguing quietly about money, thinking I'm asleep. Dad's working extra shifts just to make ends meet, and I know Mom's credit cards are maxed out. It's a horrible feeling knowing I'm the reason my parents are so stressed about money now. I've caught them closing out tabs about medical loans or second mortgages the moment I roll into a room. They act like everything's fine, but it's obvious they're panicking about the costs. The exhaustion on their faces says it all. They're completely worn out from taking care of me non-stop. I try my hardest to handle things on my own, but there's still so much I can't do without help. Getting out of bed, showering, even reaching things I never gave a second thought to before. I push myself as hard as I can during physical therapy and practice wheelchair transfers until my arms feel like they're going to fall off. Some days, I feel like I'm making progress, but nights are the worst. That's when I miss Megan the most and can't stop thinking about all the plans we had for the future. College was our dream since we were freshmen. We had everything mapped out. Now, I spend most nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'll ever even be able to go at all. My parents got me a therapist, but honestly, it hasn't done much to help. Sometimes, when I'm lying awake, I wish I had a sister I could talk to about all of this. But my relationship with Emma, who's 28, has always been complicated. When I was little, I thought Emma was the coolest person ever. I copied everything she did. Her clothes, the way she talked, even the music she listened to. But she acted like I was just this annoying little shadow following her around. If I tried hanging out in her room, she'd kick me out. When I was excited to start at the same middle school she'd gone to, she barely even acknowledged it. Our parents never stepped in to bridge the gap. Anytime I'd complain, they'd just say things like, "Emma needs space," or "Emma's stressed about school." By the time she left for college, we barely spoke. After graduating, she moved to Europe for some high-powered job and basically disappeared from our lives except for the occasional major holiday. Even then, she usually had some excuse about work or flights being too expensive. What's really messed up is how my parents bend over backward to defend Emma. No matter what, they never call her out when she ignores family stuff or misses important milestones. If I complained, they'd shut me down with, "That's just how Emma is," or "She's building her career." Even after my accident, when I almost died, she only called twice and didn't bother visiting. Mom and Dad made excuse after excuse for her. "She's busy at work," or "It's complicated with international travel." If I pushed back, they'd get defensive like I was out of line for being upset. But lately, I've started wondering if there's something bigger going on. Some reason they're always on her side. I guess I shouldn't have been so shocked when, last week, everything blew up. My parents sat me down for one of those serious family talks that never lead to anything good. Turns out, Emma's finally coming home next month, and she's bringing her new fiancé, a guy none of us have even met. She's barely checked in since the accident, just a couple of awkward phone calls where she sounded uncomfortable the whole time. Her excuses for not visiting were always the same. Work's too busy, she can't get time off, flights cost too much, you name it. I've tried not to take it personally, but it's hard not to. It hurts like hell that my own sister couldn't be bothered to show up after I nearly died. The few times Emma has reached out since my accident have been full of red flags I should have picked up on earlier. She's always been strange about social media, but now it's more obvious. She only posts old family photos from years ago, like group shots from holidays or vacations, and nothing recent. When she called twice after the accident, both conversations were super short, and my parents jumped in to cover for her, saying I was resting or at therapy. The second time, when my wheelchair was visible in the background, she hung up almost immediately, making some lame excuse. My parents didn't say a word about it. Acting like this was completely normal behavior. It's like they're perfectly fine with Emma pretending I don't even exist. Then they dropped the real bombshell. They want me out of the house before Emma arrives. They said they're burnt out and need a break from taking care of me. Their bright idea? I should stay with a friend or check into a hotel until I can find a permanent place to live. Dad even offered to cover a few weeks at an extended stay hotel, like that somehow makes it better. He kept saying it's just temporary until you get back on your feet, which is a seriously messed up thing to say to someone who might never walk again. I felt blindsided. How am I supposed to live on my own when I can barely transfer in and out of my wheelchair without assistance? All my friends are heading off to college. They're not in a position to take care of me. I tried explaining this to my parents, but they just got defensive and started showing me articles about disabled people living independently. They told me I'm an adult now and need to figure it out, as if turning 19 magically makes me capable of handling life on my own after everything I've been through. I even tried contacting Emma directly to figure out what was going on, but she completely ignored my calls and texts. My parents, of course, jumped to her defense. She's so busy with wedding planning, and this is a stressful time for her. They said I should be more understanding because this is such an important moment in Emma's life, and she doesn't need any unnecessary complications. Like my existence is just some unfortunate complication in their picture-perfect family reunion. It's beyond messed up. Eventually, they admitted the truth. Emma never told her fiancé about me. She's apparently ashamed of having a disabled sister and doesn't want to deal with explaining my situation. My parents are going along with it because they don't want to create tension during Emma's visit. Instead of standing up for me, they've decided it's easier to pretend I don't exist, just to keep Emma's wedding plans smooth and drama-free. I was completely devastated. These are the same parents who stood by me during the worst months of my life, and now they're erasing me because I'm inconvenient. I broke down sobbing, but they just sat there, repeating weak excuses about how complicated the situation is. It felt just like losing Megan all over again. That same gut-wrenching feeling of having everything ripped away from me without warning. Except this time, it's my own family turning their backs on me. I've started thinking about reaching out to my mom's parents, my grandparents, who I've never even met. My mom cut them off years ago and has always refused to explain why. Anytime I asked about them growing up, she'd immediately shut me down. All I know is that they're wealthy and live a few hours away. I once found some old family photos in the attic and overheard bits of conversations between my parents about them, but it's like this huge family mystery no one's willing to talk about. When I brought up the idea of contacting my grandparents, my mom completely lost it. She started pacing the room, her face turning red, yelling that I was absolutely forbidden from reaching out to them. She kept repeating that it would destroy the family, and that I had no idea what kind of chaos I'd be causing. But honestly, what family is even left to destroy at this point? The people who are supposed to love and support me are literally kicking me out while I'm still recovering from a life-altering injury. What could possibly be worse than that? I feel so lost. The accident already took Megan and my independence, and now it feels like my family is slipping away too. I don't know if I should defy my mom and reach out to my grandparents anyway. I realize it could stir up a lot of drama, but I'm running out of options. Should I respect her wishes and try to figure something else out? Or do I take the risk and contact them when my own parents are throwing me out? Update 1. Thank you to everyone who commented on my post. Your messages made me cry, but in a good way. It's such a relief to know I'm not crazy for feeling this way. So many of you pointed out how messed up it is that my parents are trying to hide me just because Emma is coming home, and you're absolutely right. To answer some of the questions people asked, no, there's no insurance money from the accident. The drunk driver who hit us didn't have insurance and is now in jail. Sarah's parents hired a lawyer, but they were told suing him wouldn't help since he doesn't have any assets. A few of you mentioned disability benefits. I've applied, but the process is dragging on forever. To make things worse, my parents seem strangely unwilling to help with the paperwork. Some of you suggested I reach out to Sarah's parents for support, but they moved across the country last month. I think staying here was just too painful for them after everything. Someone else asked why Emma can't just tell her fiancé about me before they visit. Honestly, I have no idea. My parents act like it would completely ruin everything if he found out about me, like having a disabled sister is some huge scandal. It makes no sense unless there's something they're not telling me. Now for the update. I confronted my parents again. I told them that kicking me out isn't an option because I literally have nowhere else to go. My dad, instead of addressing the real issue, started talking about some assisted living facilities he'd been researching. He even pulled out a whole folder of brochures and printouts, which made it obvious he'd been planning this behind my back. It hit me like a punch in the gut. This is the same dad who used to spend hours helping me plan for college, and now he's putting all that energy into figuring out where to dump me. My mom just sat there in silence, avoiding eye contact the entire time. When I asked them outright if they were seriously choosing Emma over me, my dad got all defensive. He insisted they weren't choosing anyone, and claimed they just needed to focus on Emma right now. What a load of garbage. My mom started crying, saying how hard this has been on everyone. She went on about how they never expected to be taking care of a disabled child at their age. Like I chose this, like I wanted to lose my best friend and end up paralyzed. The physical therapy bills are piling up. I saw a stack of them in my dad's office the other day when I was looking for a phone charger. Some of them even had past due stamped across the top. I know the expenses are overwhelming, and I get that they're stressed about money. But here's the thing. They're willing to shell out for an assisted living facility just to get me out of the house before Emma comes. That would cost way more than keeping me at home. So clearly, this isn't just about money. My dad kept saying how this arrangement would be better for everyone, and how I need to start being more independent. My mom sat there nodding along, but she still wouldn't look at me. Then my dad started talking about Emma's visit being a fresh start for the family. That's when I lost it. A fresh start? For who? Exactly? They get to play the perfect family with Emma while I'm shipped off to God knows where? I was furious. I blurted out something like, "At least I'm actually part of this family, unlike Emma, who acts like she couldn't care less about any of you." My mom's face went completely pale. My dad started yelling at me to apologize, but I didn't. I've never seen them react like that to anything I've said before. Then my dad did something that caught me off guard. He grabbed my wheelchair and spun me around to face him. He's never touched me like that before, not even in anger. Then my mom said something that really threw me. Through her tears, she muttered, "You don't understand anything about our family. Not the family or this family, but our family." Like she was drawing a line between herself, my dad, and Emma, and leaving me out of it entirely. I tried to ask what she meant, but she just stood up and walked out of the room, still crying. My dad followed her, but before he left, he gave me a look I've never seen from him before. It wasn't anger or disappointment. It was fear, like he was terrified of whatever she might say next. I couldn't stop replaying their reaction in my mind. It felt way too intense for what I'd said, so I decided to dig through our old photo albums while my parents were at work. That's when I found an album from when Emma was little, before I was born. There were pictures of her with our grandparents, the same grandparents my mom refuses to let me contact. The weirdest part? In every single photo, Emma looks exactly like my grandpa. Same eyes, same nose, even the same smile. I, on the other hand, don't look anything like him. I'd always thought I resembled my mom's side of the family more, but flipping through these photos made me realize I don't really look like anyone on her side at all. Stuffed in the back of the album were some old papers. Most were too faded to make out, but one letter stood out. It was from my grandparents, addressed to my mom, and talked about correcting past mistakes and doing the right thing for Emma. The date on it matched up with when Mom cut contact with them. There were more letters, too, many mentioning Emma and some kind of trust fund. I also found medical papers, though most of it looked like gibberish to me. Something about genetic testing. The photos got stranger after a certain point. There's this big gap where no pictures exist for about a year. Then, suddenly, there are photos of my mom looking exhausted, holding baby Emma. My dad wasn't in any of these shots. The next set of pictures is from what looks like a big family gathering with my grandparents. Everyone is smiling, looking so happy. But after that, nothing. No more photos with my mom's side of the family at all. I'm starting to form some pretty dark theories about what might be going on here. I found one of my mom's cousins on Facebook and messaged her, asking if she knew why my mom cut ties with the family. She left me on read and then blocked me an hour later. I tried messaging another cousin, and all they replied was, "You need to talk to your mom about this." Meanwhile, my parents are still set on getting me out of the house before Emma arrives. They've been sending me links to apartments and assisted living facilities. Acting like this is all perfectly reasonable. My mom even offered to hire someone to help pack up my room. She seems desperate to make sure I'm gone before Emma shows up. Yesterday, I overheard them arguing about money again. My dad said something about having to ask them for help again, and my mom started shouting, "Absolutely not." Whatever's going on, they're clearly hiding something big. I haven't said anything to my parents about what I found in the album, but suddenly so much about my childhood is clicking into place. Why Emma always seemed to hate me, why my parents let her get away with everything, and why they're so on edge about her coming home. I keep thinking about this one time when I was little. Emma was screaming at my mom during a fight and yelled, "You can't tell me what to do. You're not my real mom anyway." At the time, I figured she was just being a dramatic teenager. But now, I'm not so sure. I keep looking at the phone number I found in those old papers, wondering if I should just call my grandparents. My hands shake every time I think about it. But honestly, what do I have to lose? My parents have already decided to throw me away to keep Emma happy. Maybe it's time I found out the truth for myself. Update 2. I did it. I called my grandparents. After my last update, I spent 2 days staring at their phone number, my hands trembling every time I tried to dial. Yesterday morning, my parents left yet another assisted living brochure on my bed. This one was for a place 3 hours away. That was my breaking point. I waited until they went grocery shopping and dialed the number. My grandma answered on the third ring. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. Then I finally managed to say, "Hi, this isn't my name. I'm Mom's name, daughter." There was this long silence, and I thought maybe she'd hung up. But then I heard her start crying. Full-on, gut-wrenching sobs. She called out for my grandpa to come to the phone. When she finally calmed down enough to talk, the first thing she said was, "We've been trying to find you." I was stunned. They already knew about my accident. They'd read about it in the local paper. But my mom had blocked their number when they tried to reach out. They even came to the hospital to see me, but my parents made sure they couldn't get in. My grandma told me they'd been sending letters and trying to contact me for months. Then she dropped the biggest bombshell of all. My mom isn't Emma's mom. My grandparents are. Emma isn't my sister. She's my mom's sister. Apparently, my mom raised Emma as her own after some serious stuff went down with my grandparents when Emma was a baby. That's why Emma looks so much like my grandpa in those photos, because she's actually his daughter. My grandma explained that when Emma was born, my mom was only about 18. My grandparents were going through a really rough time. So my mom offered to take care of Emma temporarily until they got back on their feet. But then my mom met my dad, moved away, and started telling everyone Emma was her daughter. Somehow, she even got Emma's birth certificate changed to reflect that. My grandparents told me they tried to get Emma back once their lives were stable again. But my mom threatened to expose some things from their past that could have gotten them into serious trouble. They had no choice but to watch their own daughter grow up calling someone else mom. They tried to stay involved in Emma's life, but my mom kept pushing them further and further away. When Emma was 15, she found out the truth. That's when she started acting out and eventually decided to move to Europe. She wasn't just being a rebellious teenager. She was grappling with the fact that her entire life had been a lie. My parents convinced her not to tell me, saying it would destroy the family if I found out. My grandma said they wanted to tell me the truth so many times, but my mom threatened to cut them off completely if they ever did. The only reason they were able to see Emma at all was by agreeing to keep the secret. Then, when my mom found out they were still sending Emma money and trying to stay in her life, she cut them off anyway. Now Emma's coming back with her fiancé, and she wants to reconnect with her real parents, my grandparents. That's the real reason my parents want me out of the house. They're terrified I'll find out the truth and ruin their carefully constructed lie. What they don't realize is that Emma's fiancé already knows the whole story. My grandparents want me to come live with them. They said they've had a ground floor room set up for someone in a wheelchair ever since my accident, hoping they'd get the chance to bring me home. They have the money to help with my medical bills and physical therapy, and they even offered to pay for me to take online college classes when I feel ready. I'm sitting here crying as I type this. My parents aren't just trying to hide me because I'm disabled. They're trying to hide me because my existence makes it harder for them to pretend Emma is their real daughter. All the times they chose her over me, all the excuses they made for her. It wasn't because they loved her more. It was because they were afraid of losing her to my grandparents. Since our call, my grandma has been texting me nonstop. She keeps apologizing for not fighting harder to be in my life, and for letting my mom keep me in the dark. She even sent me photos of the room they prepared for me. It's beautiful, warm, and inviting, like they were waiting for me all along. She offered to come pick me up tomorrow since they only live 2 hours away. I haven't told my parents what I know yet. They're downstairs right now, talking about Emma's visit like nothing's wrong. I can hear my mom planning what to cook for Emma's first night here, as if she's not actively plotting to ship me off somewhere. I've decided to take my grandparents up on their offer, not because I want to hurt my parents, but because, for the first time since the accident, someone is actually choosing me. Someone is making room for me in their life instead of trying to push me out of sight. I'm going to tell my parents tomorrow. My grandparents are coming to help me move. I'm scared, but at the same time, I feel a strange sense of relief. At least now I finally understand why so much in my life felt wrong for so long. Update 3. Final update. It's been a month since everything happened, and I'm writing this from my new room at my grandparents' house. A lot has changed. The morning after I spoke with my grandparents, I decided to confront my parents. I waited until they were sitting together at breakfast and said, "I know Emma is actually your sister, Mom." My mom froze, her coffee mug slipping from her hands and shattering on the floor. She didn't even flinch. She just sat there, staring at me like I'd spoken in a language she didn't understand. My dad jumped in, stammering something about me not knowing what I was talking about, but I cut him off. I told them about the photos, the letters, and how I'd called my grandparents. That's when my mom started crying. She launched into this long explanation about how they did what they thought was best at the time. She said she was trying to protect Emma, that my grandparents weren't in a good place back then, and that she couldn't trust them with a baby. My dad kept repeating that they were going to tell me, eventually, but I wasn't buying it. If they'd had their way, I would have been shipped off to a facility just to keep their secret intact. When I said that, my mom broke down completely. Then my dad admitted the real reason they were trying to get rid of me. When Emma told them she wanted to come clean to her fiancé about the truth, they panicked. They figured if I wasn't here when Emma arrived, they could handle it without me complicating things. My grandparents showed up that afternoon, and that's when everything exploded. The moment my mom saw them, she completely lost it. She started screaming about how they had no right to be there, and how they were ruining everything she'd worked so hard to build. My grandpa stayed calm, telling her they were only there to help me move. That's when things got even more intense. My mom physically tried to block them from coming inside. My dad had to grab her and pull her back. She was yelling, "You can't take both my daughters," over and over, like she was unraveling right there in front of us. My grandma didn't raise her voice. She just looked my mom straight in the eye and said, "Emma was never your daughter. And now you're losing your real daughter because you couldn't let go of that lie." Emma found out that I knew the truth, and she called me. For the first time in my life, she apologized for how terrible she'd been as a sister. She explained how finding out the truth as a teenager completely messed her up, and how she took it out on me because I was the daughter our mom actually wanted. She admitted she'd been carrying that resentment for years, but said she's in therapy now, working through it. We ended up talking for hours. It was the first real, honest conversation we've ever had. My grandparents helped me move that same day. They'd already arranged to have my medical records transferred to doctors in their area. The room they set up for me is incredible. It's fully accessible, with thoughtful details like a ceiling lift system to help me get in and out of bed. My grandma even found an occupational therapist nearby who specializes in spinal cord injuries. My mom keeps calling, but I'm not ready to talk to her yet. My dad sends texts sometimes, mostly just asking if I'm okay. Both of them say they want to explain everything, but honestly, what's left to explain? They were ready to toss me aside to protect a lie they've been living with for 28 years. Emma is still planning to visit, but she'll be staying with our grandparents instead. She told me she wants to get to know me as her niece now. Her fiancé seems pretty unfazed by all the family drama. Apparently, his own family has had its share of chaos. Emma sent me some photos of the two of them together, and they look genuinely happy. Last week, I started my first online class. My grandparents bought me this awesome adjustable desk that works perfectly with my wheelchair. Sometimes my grandma sits with me while I study, just like Sarah used to. Yesterday, she mentioned that Sarah's parents had called to check on me. They're planning to come visit soon. For the first time since the accident, I feel like I have a future. Sure, I'm still in the wheelchair, and yes, I still miss Sarah every single day. But now I have family who actually want me in their lives. I have a chance to start fresh and build something meaningful.